the kind invitation to be part of this panel, and thank you everyone for your talks over the last few days. I'm going to jump straight in because I've got a bunch to say, but here's some credentials. So I'm going to share some research that I did as part of the Night project. There we go. With Ben Campkin, and our project, which was part of a broader pan-European project, it focused on we focused on LGBTQ night spaces oriented around my histories in London. And my research as part of Dunn and I's work looked at club nights that were created by and for queer and trans people of colour, women and trans people, obviously these are overlapping groups, who are underserved in LGBTQ nightlife venues. And the focus of this talk is going to be on queer and trans people of colour and the nights that they've created. And there's a ton of overlaps with other talks at the conference as well that I'm sure you'll spot. Because of time, I'm actually not going to talk about migration and diaspora, but obviously with the topics that I'm talking about, there's clear connections with London as a city that's profoundly shaped by migration due to British imperialism and relatedly its contemporary status as a global city. So quickly on methodology, we did this during the pandemic. We held online long tables. The one for my strand of research was with 9 participants plus Ben and I did 4 follow-up interviews, and this was in 2021. I'm not going to go into long tables now, but it's a queer feminist method devised by Lois Reaver, who's an artist and academic. I'm happy to talk more about this in the Q&A if anyone's interested. So I'm going to jump into some theory now and then bring this into dialogue with the participants' perspectives. So in thinking about care, I'm drawing predominantly on 2 very short but really rich texts, one by the Care Collective and by Hill Malatino. And my thinking on care aligns with other talks that we've heard about today. The Care Collective examine conditions and independencies that are shaped by neoliberalism, and they argue that the crisis of care has become particularly acute over the last 40 years as governments accepted neoliberal capitalism's near ubiquitous positioning of profit-making as an organising principle of life. It has meant systematically prioritising the interests and flows of financial capital. Neoliberal policies, including urban governance, have permeated London's urban conditions since the 1980s. And Ben Campkin and I found in previous research that this has significantly contributed to closures and threats to LGBTQ nightlife venues. And we found that there was a 58% loss of LGBTQ nightlife venues between 2006 and 2017. And some really significant drivers for this included gentrification and massive rent hikes, private developer-led regeneration, and change of use by landlords seeking to maximise profits. The Care Collective also described care as a social capacity and activity involving the nurturing of all that is necessary for the welfare and flourishing of life. And for many, LGBTQ venues fulfill this function. And that was evident in Ben and I's research with communities who use them, but of course it's more complicated and contingent than this. LGBTQ venues in London are predominantly operated and used by white cis gay men who are often also middle class. In the last year, a lesbian bar in London, I really hope that they do well, as hostile conditions to work in. But there remains this really significant asymmetry and geography that also shapes the geography of nightlife spaces. These new bars are in East London, for example, in locations that aren't super easy to access by public transport unless you live in that area. So it remains spatialized across the landscape of LGBTQ nightlife venues. And these conditions make club nights a more accessible form of nightlife to produce, and which is a common pattern in London, but of course in other cities as well. The Hill Malatino, in their thinking on trans care, they argue that care is deeply political. To be committed to social justice is to care. To care is to empathise enough to grasp and service the needs of another and to do so willingly. And I think this emphasis here on relationality, reciprocity, recognition, agency and action, and also their social justice emphasis aligns Malatino's thinking with how I'm understanding a queer, or what I'm describing as a queer praxis of care in the context of nightlife. And this ethos was evident in the conversations with club night promoters who are centering underserved LGBTQ communities when Ben and I were primarily, but not exclusively, researching nightlife venues. And the Night project enabled us to develop this work with nightlife producers more. My research as part of Night focused on how a queer praxis of care might be understood as resisting inequities that are spatialized through LGBTQ nightlife infrastructures and urban conditions in London. Conditions which, as the Care Collective argue, are uncaring by design, and I'd add here from a social justice perspective, and in which defensive self-interest thrive. And of course, in night studies and in nightlife, we're increasingly thinking about care, but particularly in relation to awareness teams and welfare teams, which is really great. In this talk, I'm going to focus on care as a starting point or motivator that animates a queer praxis of care that serves the needs of marginalised and minoritized people. I feel really cautious about romanticizing care, and my thinking here is also influenced by Ben Walter's theorizing of queer fun, which I don't have time to go into, unfortunately. But as Malatino and others have observed, academic thinking on care has often been very cis heteronormative, which is a tacit politics of that care, which isn't often named. For me, a queer politics of care is an anti-oppressive and anti-normative politics that can translate into a praxis of creating and supporting alternative spaces of possibility that resist injustice. Injustice shaped by cis heteropatriarchy, racism, classism, and ableism, and other systems that reproduce inequity, neoliberalism and imperialism, for example. But there are also other politics of care that are oriented to justify violence and oppression and inequity. For example, you could think of a fascist politics of care that is deeply invested in white supremacy. And for this reason, I understand care as oriented, as Sir also talked about today. And I draw from Ahmed's queer phenomenology on this. Ahmed argues that orientations shape not only how we inhabit space, but how we apprehend the world of shared inhabitants, as well as who or what we direct our energy and attention towards. So regarding nocturnal otherness, the theme of this panel, you could say that we become oriented through being in relation to social conditions that reproduce otherness, and by our personal desires and experience that direct our energy and attention. I'm also talking about infrastructure, and I'm primarily drawing here on Laurent Ballon, although my thinking is inspired by others as well. Laurent Ballon describes infrastructure as being defined by movement or patterning of social form. It is the living mediation of what organizes life, the life world of a structure. And Ballon identifies use as a vital feature of infrastructures of the social that include practices that sustain life where capitalism and the state have failed through imposing austerity. They argue that glitches disrupt infrastructural transition and transmission and reveal those failures, but that alternative reparative infrastructures can emerge from glitches. And therefore we might understand LGBTQ people and spaces as glitching that transmission of infrastructures that reproduce the dominance of cis heteronormative life world. And as the following shows, as I move into participants' experiences, within LGBTQ nightlife, there are complexities, tensions, and failures that club night producers are working to resist. And I'm understanding inequity here as an infrastructural failure that is connected to care. So let's start with Lily. So Lily and Hakeem and Ritu, who you'll meet in a moment, for them, formative moments that oriented them towards co-creating the club nights that they co-run was encountering possibilities for belonging that were deeper than they'd previously experienced. Lily described co-founding the Bit and Peach after spending most of her clubbing life denying what she described as her Asian side and also her queerness. This changed when she first performed at Cocoa Butter Club, which is a queer cabaret club night that centres queer performers of colour and particularly Black people. Lily described this as the first time I realised how much I'd been missing. It was such a feeling of freedom to perform to a bunch of people that actually understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. That was probably when I started having a little bit look a little bit more about in person, creating the Bit and I didn't even know I needed. In In 2016, Hakeem co-founded the Batty Mama, which is a queer Black performance artist, visual art and interactive media club. He described queer Black spaces, also like Cocoa Butter Club, as a bit of a eureka moment. He said, you didn't realize it was possible. And then now you're in it and it's like, wow, I could have done this years ago. The Batty Mama for me is inspired by other queer Black people. And I've included on this slide snippets of Batty Mama events, which shows them moving around different venues, which is a really common experience for club night producers who are trying to find the right site or the right night for their event. And there's a kind of hierarchy that emerges here, which I'm happy to talk about later if you'd like. Ritu spoke of feeling unwelcome and like an anomaly in many lesbian spaces during the 80s and 90s, whilst also feeling out of place within the heteronormative Asian underground music scene that she was also part of. And this fueled her desire to create a club night that centered LGBTQ people with South Asian heritage. In 1988, Ritu co-founded Shakti, a South Asian LGBTQ organisation, which she thinks is probably the first of a kind in the UK, possibly beyond. She says, I still remember going to the first meeting of Shakti, sitting around a table with other South Asian people and, queer people, and just not having to explain certain things. Even talking about it now is quite emotional for me. And Lily also spoke about the emotions that it brought up when she talked about creating Bit and Peach. Initially, Shakti, Ritu says, was open to everyone and incredibly diverse, but later became hostile towards certain people, including drag queens. And this failure to care for gender non-conforming people was one reason why Ritu left Shakti and co-founded Club Kali in 1995. She says, we always had the chutney queens performing because right from the minute we opened, Club Kali straight away wore its true colours on its sleeve and was basically saying, this club is for you. And the chutney queens are a group of drag performers who have always performed their events. So for participants, being in the room with other LGBTQ people did not necessarily translate into the sense of belonging that they needed, which required more specific conditions of commonality. In considering relationships to the commons and belonging and drawing from Jose Esteban Munoz's thinking on disidentification, Boulogne notes, just because we're in a room together does not mean that we belong to the room or each other. Belonging is a specific genre of affect, history and political mediation that cannot be presumed and is always being contested. Ritu, Hakeem and Lily's experiences speak to their investments in resisting inequities by queerly reconfiguring and extending LGBTQ nightlife infrastructures, their energy and attention being oriented by a queer practice of care that recognises and serves the needs of themselves and those with similar backgrounds needing deeper experiences of belonging. All club night producers that we interviewed described seeking to produce spaces that support alternative queer life worlds, with Lily and Ritu, and also Tamsin, who didn't meet but runs a night called Unskinny Bob, describing queer families as being formed through their club nights. Ben Campkin has argued that the diversity and dynamism of venues and events in London makes it helpful to think not of a singular enclave, but of a queer infrastructure, with licensed premises being the most visible surface. City authorities and consultancies who are employed by them are increasingly mapping nightlife infrastructures with to evidence that evidence is often used as a basis for arguments for supporting venues, and venues being, as Ben notes, the type of space that is most easily identifiable, measurable and mappable. And our research also became bound up with this. Much of this work has failed to encompass spatial and temporal complexities and inequities that shape everyday access to spaces of belonging. In highlighting how alternative reparative infrastructures can emerge from glitches that reveal infrastructural failures, Boulogne also noticed that these do not necessarily defeat the failed infrastructures. And queer and club night producers are clearly doing really valuable caring labour that is very much influenced wider practices within LGBTQ venues and beyond. But particularly if we zoom out at the scale of the city, there remains a profound asymmetry, with very few venues being run by and centering LGBTQ people of colour, women and trans people. And also disabled access is a massive issue in terms of accessibility of venues, which I think is a blind spot in Ben and I's research and is something that I'm addressing more in my current research. And so there are these enduring social, temporal and spatial inequities in terms of who gets to access spaces of belonging in a more unplanned everyday ways. For example, who gets to go and have a quiet beer on a Tuesday night and experience a similar kind of belonging that they might find at a club night. And I think this speaks to the need for us to continually interrogate and contest neoliberal urban conditions, and for researchers to produce infrastructural analyses that encapsulate these complexities and inequities that are otherwise erased. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay. So we'll do questions, of course, at the end. But I think if they're here online, we should have, we should have Paul Perron, Janice Lafontaine, Cora Borny, and Roman Alonso speaking.
Hello, everyone.
Ah, it's Paul. Okay.
Yes, I mean, we are all, the three of us are here today.
Great. I'll let you speak.
We don't see all of you, but hi, thank you so much for having us. I'm sharing my screen right now. Can you see?
No?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So today we're going to present you the project that we called Public Affairs. It's a curatorial project that we developed, the three of us, so Roman Alonso, Janice Lafontaine-Carboni, and myself, Paul Perron. We are a team of three architects, researchers, and curators. And through this curatorial project, we are trying to raise the question on how space participates in the...
Sorry? I can't. Your screen's gone dark.
Yeah, it's just the first slide. It's a GIF that is going in a loop, and the loop is not perfect.
Yeah, just quiet.
Yeah, it's just the end of the GIF, let's say. So let's say that through this project that we called Public Affairs, we are trying to raise the question of how space participates in the perpetuation of power relations, and through that strategy participate in the construction of normative subjectivities. This project, Public Affairs, so like I said, a curatorial project, will be divided in three parts that the quite quick GIF was trying to depict. It's a public love, public care, and public dance. And it's a one-year project that is taking place in Geneva. And the point is to try to create dialogue between disciplines and tools of conception, especially gathering visual arts, researchers, architects, and through the lens, of course, of gender and sexuality. So the first, let's say, entrance into the subject that we decided to have was to reread the famous slogan of the feminist struggles of the 60s that was saying that the private or the personal is political. So this slogan, which marked these movements of the 60s, suggests that the architecture of public places and domestic territories must be put back in some way at the center of debates on the reproduction of gender and sex inequalities. And so we believe that it needs to be, yes, like I've said, re-put back into the public affairs, as it had been during sometimes during the 20th century, when the home, the bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom, and the laundry became places of public interest through those struggles. And at the same time, what was interesting for us is that in the same period, struggles against HIV and AIDS also highlighted the fact that the way in which our sexualities, genders, and unequal access to care and support networks are also shaped by and through architectures. From that, we understand that space such as the boudoir, the toilets, the hospital, the sauna, the club, or the morgue briefly became a matter of public interest, but also, of course, through the development of neoliberal economy in our societies, in our Western societies, have been put back into the private sphere. So let's say our first observation is that within the inhabitation perimeter, practices of love, care, maintenance, health weights individually on the caregiver's shoulder, while many forms of social reproduction of minor groups have been pathologized, criminalized, and their space and resources therefore closed and sanitized in some way. And so for us to develop those those thematics, let's say, we believe that the night is a territory of practices that we can approach. Yeah, sorry, we can approach the night as a territory of practices that actually don't belong to the dominant system of social reproduction, and who actually welcomes, let's say, alternative or other forms of interrelation and domestic practices. So through these curatorial projects, we are interested in searching in archives of subjectivities, looking for fragments of domestic practices diluted in public sphere. So not necessarily within the boundaries of the home, of what we understand a home, which is housing production, basically. So diluted in the public sphere, that we question both the responsibility and limitation of this public territory. We will develop a bit later on what we understand as an archive that will be relevant for us as an object of study. And we are trying to look into this research, the extension of the domestic sphere into the public realm, troubling the notion of intimacy, privacy, and publicity. Space of unexpected coalition that are excluded from the light of dominant reproductive system. So like I've mentioned briefly during the first slide, in order to address the spatial reproductive resources that are escaping the dominant system of social reproduction, we decided to divide this research into three steps, let's say, or three sequences that we addressed through the activities and practices which marks three ways of inhabiting space and through which the domestic sphere extend or has the possibility to extend on public spaces. So those activities are love, care, and dance, and that we will be looked at through various social composition and forms, and of course their traduction into their spatial context. Let's say how those interrelations are actually translated into spatial organization. And while looking at them outside of the private sphere, we understand that those three activities are shown to be labor and reproductive labor. So we really want to consider love, care, and dance, so the three at the same time, as practices of labor and reproductive labor that are most of the time undervalued, unpaid, of course, marginalized, and performed by feminized, racialized caregivers. And yes, like I said, it will define the three chapters of our curatorial research. So through this strategy, let's say, of this project that we've been building, what we are asking ourselves are the following questions. So the first one, that is a bit let's say the one that the other are divided from, is in which ways architecture perpetuates power relation and the construction of normative subjectivities. The second one would be, how can we bring domesticity, reproductive work, and gender and sexual inequalities back into the center of public affairs? How nightscapes are reproductive resources for marginalized communities and other groups that are excluded from heteronormative institutions. And finally, how to imagine spaces and futures which thwart heteronormative institution of domination. The final question was also critical to us, and it's what helped us to define, let's say, the methodology of research of this specific project. So we tried to define an interdisciplinary frame to address them based on the observation that we made. I mean, that is our own, let's say, but that the tools of academic research turned out to be for us insufficient to address the complexity and layering of the heteronormative reproduction through space. But at the same time, the tools of architecture are also turned to be insufficient to address conception strategies, overcoming this kind of top view production of normative spatial corpus, and for us to be able to focus on manner spatialized strategies developed by multiple but invisibilized subjectivities by the discipline. So to overcome those two observations, we decided to create the possibilities of exploring this question through a format of research combined with a curatorial residency. The point was to create space of dialogue between visual artists, experts, activists, but also architects, through research exhibitions that were all allowing events, residency, moment of productions, and all of those different formats will be able to crystallize architectural exploration of past, present, and future spatial reproductive resources falling outside of the dominant heteronormative reproduction of capitalism. So the residency, as I mentioned, will last for a year. And during this time, the collective, so on let's say that the exhibition part will be taken care of by artists or architect and researcher in residency. And on the other side, ourselves, the three of us as a collective, will explore archives of minoritarian movements and translate them into love, care, and densist practices into spatial narratives, so as to identify the spatial reproductive resources. So like I've mentioned, the program will last for 1 year. Sorry, it's a bit inverted on this slide, but we divided the residency into 3 steps, as I mentioned: public love, public care, and public dance. And just to introduce it a bit to you, so we just started the first one. It started last week. So we are in the beginning of this process, let's say. And it's every time divided into different formats, as I mentioned. So artists will be developing their own production by giving different talk, workshop, and also collective lecture. And at the same time, it will be a place of public discourse and exchange and dialogue in between, through those questions and through the question raised by the artists themselves. And our site, our own research will be implemented into those dialogue and those discussion in between those three steps of the curatorial research.
Hi everyone, it's Jenny speaking. Don't want to interrupt the flow, so I will continue directly and thank everyone later. So what you see on the image here is a part of the poster for Public Love that, as Paul said, just started last week. So we are really kind of in the beginning of both the research process and also the exhibition process. But through this first iteration, we will focus on love, both as a practice, but also as an affect, as an interrelation, always considering it as a labor practice. In this sense, we are exploring love practices that challenge neoliberal sexual and romantic politics with a particular focus on the spatial dimensions and way of inhabiting and transforming the world. Then, as examples, we will research and look at other ways of making kin of other sexualities, other definition and practices of love, other politics of affects that will be all kind of woven together through discussions, but also through encounters with the works of the artists that will be accompanying us throughout the research. Can you change the slide, Paul, please? Thanks. So as a frame, we look how in our contemporary liberal societies, romantic love is idealized as an act that breaks down class boundaries and social and familial expectations, as we see in many fictions such as Cinderella, Titanic, or even Pocahontas. Yet this form of romantic love is at the heart of the reproduction and the maintenance of heteronormative social institutions such as the monogamous couple, the nuclear family, the home, and we see it like through the typologies of housing. These artifacts, so the couple, the nuclear family, etc., are unstable and shifting from one society to the others, and are structured by the great collective confusion between love and care work, nurturing and stabilizing many gender inequalities while excluding and marginalizing racial, cultural, gender, and sexual minorities. These sexual and relational policies maintain the illusion that love is a pure exercise in individual freedom and emancipation, while they maximize capitalist social reproduction and normalize relation between private property, privatization of care, exploitation of minor bodies, and affects. Thus, as a first step, through the exhibition and research, we will address the narrative around heteronormativity as the only valid form of love in our society. This we will look at it, especially looking in our everyday spaces, in which the family and the heterosexual couple are the two main subjects of Western architectural discipline. The domestic spaces are the scene in which we build our first understanding of family, of care and love, but they are also the places structured by this institutionalized form of romantic love. Yet, idealized love is systematically reduced to the private sphere, is the disciplinary structure through which the architect enters into the design of space. It therefore seems essential to question the limits of domesticity, the private sphere, working spaces and times, in order to interrogate the relationship that bind and reproduce us. Thus, at the heart of many projects for social reproduction that we'll be looking at are also projects for the reinvention of love and of the sexual, relational, and family policies that accompany them, through notably space. Then, as a kind of second frame, we will especially look at, with a typological approach of housing, to critique heteronormativity and heteronormative forms of love. In the research phase, so what we will be doing, the three of us, throughout the first phase on love, we look for architectural projects that are especially looking at love as a labor practice, and that needs to be specialized as such. We'll then look at places of collectivization, sorry, and to different spatial resources that enable other practices of love and create possibilities for spatial empowerment. Can you go to the next one, please, Paul?
I did, but maybe there is.
Yeah, sorry, there is a delay. The main objective that we can sum up from these 3 steps of research is to look for reproductive spatial resources for minor love practices. In this frame, space is considered as a resource, and its morphologies, atmospheric qualities, programmatic definition, and narrative it carries will be the tool of exploration to make space for minor love practices. In terms of methods, the residency that we organize invites artists, architects, and researchers to delve into this spatial exploration and to propose fragments of domestic spaces that go beyond the heteronormative form of housing. For the research part, then, we will look into archives of minor subjectivities. So we will look both into archives that are situated in Switzerland. There are several of them in which we'll delve into, but also other documents that will constitute a kind of a basis, so films and other that will kind of nourish our research. And from that, we will try to map spatial strategies and approach them as architectural knowledge in their own right that our discipline should learn from to design. In this research, then, night is a privileged space-time that serves as a resource for minor love practices, and as also we saw in the previous presentation. So night is both an imaginary but also a concrete resource, as it creates spaces for liberatory practices and individual and collective emancipation. We'll then kind of do cartography of spaces, as we see on this map here. Then we will also develop a more architectural or more closer look into specific spaces. So we'll, from the archive, develop new drawings and new spatial narratives from really minor events or minor elements that we found interesting or that could be defined as spatial resources for alternative social reproduction. So to conclude, just to show you or give you some glimpse of the future of the project. So as Paul said, we have 2 more steps and exhibitions. The first one is public care that will be happening next April, in which we will rethink or try to rethink domestic territories by focusing on the relationships of bodily and psychological care. This section will focus on minor bodies and subjectivities, questioning the accessibility of domestic spaces and the free mobility in standardized housing, as well as the progressive privatization of care with regard to the linked histories of health and feminist, queer, and trans commitments. The third exhibition that will happen in 1 year, so next October, is called Public Dance and focuses on everyday domestic choreography, considering the performativity of subjectivities as political strategies. In this section, then, we'll consider dance as a form of sexuality and parties as sites of subversion and subjective and political transformation. And I think we are good. Thank you very much for your time, and looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Janice. We're gonna hold the questions till the end, okay? Great. And so next we're going to have Sean. Lee is going to talk to us, and then I think we're good for questions.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Come in.
You're probably better at me.
This one here is.
You're almost there. Almost there. This is the last version. Okay. Acción. Que no abrimos las finestas para iremos la avenida por
Start. Hi, thanks for having me, and thanks for Claire for her invitation after our roundtable in Athens from the European Architecture History Network. So I'm Sean, as the name implies. I can be Sean, Yushan, Sean, Liushan. So nighttime, discrete time, not so proud of. Nighttime, discrete time, not so proud of time. It's a patchwork of my ongoing research with the theme androgynous spatiality with the Intersect Hub in the University of Copenhagen, and aside from my previous research on the counterculture architecture and alternative urban history with Royal Danish Academy. Where here, night becomes a theater, intersectionality, queer spatiality, positionality, and it's performed, researched, and reflected, and the method of architects are renegotiated. Here are the patchworks of writing, academic writing, autobiography writing, manifestation, ethnography, auto-ethnography, afraid of becoming ethnography, the making of other, the ugly feeling of being other, over-explanation, over-production, the anxiety of not being seen, insecurity of being seen. Drawing, doodling, collage, vandalism, motion, emotion, research object, the obsession of making a research object personal, becoming research subject. Data collection, index of data collecting, noticing, faces of noticing, representation of noticing, atlas of representations, atlas of queer space, Copenhagen, disruption of Copenhagen queer spaces, re-representation of the queer space, queering. I hate gay bars at night. Can I hate gay bars? Do I hate gay bar because my internalized homophobic, because my ancestor demand I be straight? Do I hate gay bar because other gay people may hate me for being too femme or having slant eyes? No femme, no rice, no spice, no chocolate, no fat. Do I hate gay bar because I feel I'm not good enough to be gay? Am I jealous? Because I'm not strong enough, not funny enough, not sassy enough, not bougie enough, not white enough? Do I hate gay bar simply because gay in the bar call me a Chinese bitch, love the shape of my eyes, assume my inherited obedience? So cute, you are so cute. If I hate gay bars as a queer, does that mean gay bar aren't queer space? If a gay bar is not queer enough, then what is a queer space? Can I disqualify queer space? Am I too sensitive? Am I asking too much? I'm the rat, the disgrace of my community, and there are more rat, more disgrace in my community. Is that my community? Am I internalize the racism, the homophobia? Am I too sensitive? Am I asking too much? I vanished from those queer nights, cursing the queer nights, wish to come back to the queer nights. Structurally, gay men of color understood that the gay spaces were largely white space and perceived from unwelcoming for gay men of color, leading many of them to avoid such place. I wanted to cry, but did not yet know how to do it in English, so I did nothing. I did nothing. I dared to do something. What are the things I came to do? I started to draw as an architect, draw as an artist, draw as a victim, draw my body in the dark among the white bodies, the white people's bodies, Danish body in museums and Danish bodies in pornography. Drawing my visual auto-ethnography becomes a tool of processing, locating the research question, situating where the gap is. Here, feeling, encounter, affection, being, knowing, doing and relating bursted out, overflowing into surrounding. My works were later presented in the gallery in Copenhagen, 2 streets away from the gay bar I hate. And another now permanent on the wall of a church-related NGO, one street away from the Gay Bar Hates Me. A differential, oppositional, performative, and above all, transformative queer approaches to autoethnography is one which recognizes that bodies are immersed in and fixed by text, but also recognizes bodies as doing, speaking, and understanding being. So blah, 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 incomplete, unknown, fragmented, and conflicting. I am re-entering the night discreetly, not so proud. I went to the gay rape party in the dark, nowhere in Amma, Copenhagen, where the people are having fun, dancing, having sex, oral sex, orgies in the bushes, in the weeds. I walked by, passed by, biked through the area, the day after day, day and night, through the same surrounding bushes, stepping on the same weed and surrounding. I tried to sleep, I document those night walks with me, with weeds, with bushes, queer memories, queer testimonies, the same space. I check, measure, draw the bushes, the weed of the space. I collected bushes, weeds, desire, pleasure, the smell of the space, the size of the space. I archive, I interview, I try to understand and comprehend what element, what part of the space, who is inside the space, constitute this space, make it a queer space. One day I was invited to come back to this place on an app, a parking lot in the queer space that I haven't noticed. My parents came here with my day and night. Night we hang out, the day we rest. They are men of desert. You know, your night is my day. The desert night is still their night. Me too. So I can only do it now, this afternoon. Who are you then? I'm Danish when I'm straight. I mean, I'm not into men, but I like you. Very cute, femme, Asian. I love animation and kung fu. I mean, when I'm Danish, I like you. When I'm with my parents, I'm not Danish. So he blocked me later. Later, I went to draw his straight space, night, but days, with his parents' night, those migrant bodies' nights, oppressing his own night. I biking around the Copenhagen, went to some other spaces for people like him, Arabic, straight, who love to take care of me. Where I'm here, protected by a Danish guy from Eastern European hooligans. Eastern European hooligans gave me some free drinks, and the drinks were scammed by a homeless Finnish homosexual. And I witnessed some protests, straight people teaching gay how to fight. Immigrants sharing leftover in a fridge, white women jogging, non-stop. But no queer in the night, two queers in the night, in the space. I feel comfortable, I don't know why. Here is where the reason ends. I assembled the notice in a table, a map, a so-called architecture ethnography, mixed up with scale, time, people, object, subject. Architecture ethnography has reserved the ethnography of anthropology since drawing replaced objective recording method of textual description. It rejects objective and thus can be a medium of self-criticism and then might include in the description. Here, drawing makes ethnography itself has a characteristic of allowing self-evaluation and self-development. Queer as an art of noticing. The auto-ethnography serves as a vehicle of finding, locating, situating, and distancing from the research question and where the gap is. And then the toolkits of the intersectionality emerge where also come along the way, where the method of data collection can apply. Notice here, trying to show faces as a part of the toolkits. The faces of notice including, but not limited, mapping, collecting, interviewing, flirting, engaging, observing, depriving, sunbathing, walking, buying drinks, picnicking, commuting, drunk passing, biking, drawing, filming, 3D modeling, yelling, cruising, dancing, vibing, reading, citing, feeling, talking about feelings, faking, buying another drinks, smelling, making models, touching, eating kebab, hiding, revealing, daring, loving. Situating, noticing, situating, notice, and assembling, queering, and noticing. Is starting with being a queer in the context of a global north, experiencing being a fresh off the boat Asian, navigating precarious immigrant, illegal status quo, and privileging as an academic, where being a waitress laboring in the hospitality industry, an architect believing in stop building. My feelings, my feelings, ugly feelings, minor feelings, contaminated my body, overflows into surroundings. These no-catalytic states of feelings are linked to situation and precariousness where action is blocked and suspended. I position notice as a critical and embodied career practice that maneuver among action, work, and labor, mixing being, knowing, doing, and relating. Theorizing from the perspective of connecting to a long-lost body and mind, representing from the format of words and other than words. We need to stop celebrating the human cognitive reflection about the world and take our cues instead from human engagement within the world. Noticing is a bodily function, a spatial reaction, a body that overflows into its surrounding. It connects the body to numerous other humans and no humans, space and beyond. Queer as an art of noticing is destabilizing queer spatial storytelling. It's about engaging with a narrative hidden with these spaces, those made, those left as a testimony of hegemonic power. Queer is to notice, to look at the spaces and places and spaces that haven't been made. They are waiting to be made, or they can never be made. It is the act of tracing and the smelling of the reduce of the space leaves behind, touching the stance of what has passed or what is soon to be despair. By noticing, we resist the legitimacy imposed by the dominant narrative and open ourselves to the potential of a queer space, a space that is becoming, transiting, always in a process of being reimagined. Recognizing no linear time and non-scalable entity, recognizing calls for understanding that this space not adhere to the conventional social models. They operate outside of a predictable timelines and scalable development, inviting us to pay attention to the fleeting, interconnected, and often messy nature of such spaces. Queering as an art of noticing resists to being productive or normalized, exiting instead within rhythm and scarce that define capitalist and hegemonic measures of progress. It's also about defending the right to opacity, emphasizing the importance of resisting the urge to make the hidden visible. Through querying, we achieve opacity by challenging traditional notion of knowing and understanding that relies on purely logic and rational frameworks, thus maintaining the depth and the complexity of identity and experience without subjecting them to a reductive understanding. Noticing became a critical practice that incorporates observation, thought, and re-representations across different media and means. It serves as an autonomous form of expression where positionality is negotiated and we are implicated. Also as an object of aesthetic computation where reflexivity is emerged, functioning as a tool by moving beyond the confine and the brains of returning to the sensation, body, space, noticing, allows opacity to emerge organically. Almost ending. Perfect. For architects, we are long lost in the saying, forms follows function. Architecture historian said there's no queer space. There are only spaces put into queer uses. If form only follows function, there is no queer spaces. But is that true? I went to a lecture from Annie Hannigan, and she said, form follows love. I guess love is where the reason ends. Queer space is about, body engaged. The act of noticing was long longing. Noticing and queering the space, making architecture a place to love and to be loved. And that's all. Thank you.